week 15's on its way, but here's a few defenses that shouldn't be on your roster this week. The first one's the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers, they had a pretty decent game last week in their fantasy game versus the Atlanta Falcons with 9 fantasy points, but now they got a tough matchup coming up on Thursday Night Football versus the Las Vegas Raiders. And those Thursday night games, most defenses, they don't play good. A lot of points are given up. And in their last matchup versus the Raiders, they only had 2 fantasy points in Week 9, giving up 31 points, 1 sack, and a fumble recovery. So this week, the Chargers, I don't want any part of them. They're a team that you should just not play this week, and I wouldn't have confidence in a division game as well, indoors on Thursday night. The next defense I'm looking to drop this week's the New England Patriots. After that huge game versus the Los Angeles Chargers a few weeks ago, where the Patriots defense had a huge 39-point fantasy day with 3 sacks, 2 windows, a touchdown, block kick, a return touchdown in that game. They had the Rams last week, 18 points, a sack and an into. Not too crazy, but this week they got the Miami Dolphins that give up the 7th least amount of fantasy points to defenses. Last week we saw the Rams and Cam Akers run all over that defense for 200 yards, and that's been the Achilles heel for New England. And I think the Dolphins are going to do more of the same and even have Tua run a little more versus this Patriot defense. And this game I could see in the mid-20s to high 30s. So it's a game I'm going to stay away from this Patriot defense, especially after last week not showing up versus the Rams. And the third and final defense I'm going to look to drop this week is the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs, they didn't have a great game last week versus the Miami Dolphins in a game where you thought their defense would do a little bit better, but that wasn't the case. This week they got a tough matchup versus the New Orleans Saints that give up the 3rd least amount of fantasy points to defenses. And the Chiefs here, it's going to be a tough game. Then they got Atlanta coming up, who could still score some points, plus it's in Kansas City. But anyway, it's going to be a tough game this week. Kansas City, I know they're owned in 80% of fantasy leagues, but they've only had 1 double-digit fantasy game since Week 8, and that was last week because a return touchdown saved them for the fantasy points there. But anyway, the Chiefs and Saints, I think this is a shootout. I think Taysom Hill, he's going to try to find a lot of running lanes, and obviously Alvin Kamara, they're going to get him going. He's been getting it going again the last few weeks. I just can't trust this Chief defense, and I don't like holding on to more defenses than one unless it's a bye week, obviously, which the bye weeks are over. So the Chiefs D, I just can't trust them in a tough matchup and in a playoff game here. So that's a few defenses I'm looking to drop heading into week 15.